I always thought I was being responsible. Doing the right thing for my age. Every morning after brushing my teeth, I'd go to the kitchen, turn on the kettle, and open that little plastic pill box labeled with the days of the week. I liked the sound it made, like a quiet snap of control. Each compartment held a collection of supplements I had carefully chosen over time. Some were recommended by my doctor, others suggested by friends, and a few I picked up because I saw an article saying they were good for people over 60. There was glucosamine for my joints because the stairs had started to feel steeper in recent years. Vitamin D because my neighbor warned me about bone loss. A multivitamin for general health. Fish oil because someone at the senior center said it helped with memory. And a couple of others I can't even remember why I started taking. They'd become part of the routine, like coffee or checking the mail. I'd take them all at once with breakfast, usually toast, peanut butter, and my coffee. It felt like a little act of self-care. I imagined them working together like a team, going through my body and fixing what needed fixing. I didn't expect miracles, but I did expect something. More energy, maybe. Less pain in my knees, a clearer head. But as time passed, nothing really changed. My knees still ached. I still forgot what I came into the room for. I still needed a nap after lunch more often than not. I wondered if I'd bought the wrong brands, or if the pills were just duds, but they weren't cheap. I read the labels, I followed the instructions. Still, it felt like I was swallowing hope more than help. I didn't mention it to anyone at first. It felt silly to complain about vitamins not working. But one day at a community health talk, a nutritionist came in to speak. She was warm and clear, not like the doctors who rush through appointments. She asked a simple question. How many of you take supplements every day? Every hand went up, including mine. Then she asked, how many of you take them all together in the morning? Again, almost every hand. Then she smiled gently and said, that might be the problem. The room got quiet. I remember feeling a strange mix of confusion and embarrassment. I'd been doing what I thought was right, but as she spoke about timing, absorption, and how some supplements cancel each other out, I felt like someone had pulled back a curtain. I wasn't wrong to take them, but maybe, just maybe, I'd been taking them the wrong way all along. That night, I went home and looked at my kitchen counter differently. Those bottles that once gave me a sense of comfort now looked like strangers. I picked them up one by one, reading the fine print, realizing how little I actually knew about what I was taking. Some said, with food. Others said, do not take with dairy. One even said, take at bedtime. And I'd been swallowing that one with my orange juice every morning. It wasn't just about the pills. It was about the assumptions I'd made. I assumed they'd help because I was older, and older people are supposed to take supplements. But I never stopped to ask how they really worked, or whether they were working at all. And now I started to wonder, how many others like me were doing the same thing, taking everything at once and hoping for the best? The next morning, I didn't reach for my pill box right away. I just sat there at the table with my coffee, staring at the bottles like they were puzzles I had never tried to solve. I realized I had never really asked any questions about them. I had trusted labels, magazine headlines, and casual conversations in waiting rooms. I thought, they're just supplements. What could go wrong? But now, it didn't feel so simple. I pulled out a notepad and began writing down each one I took. I listed them by name, then looked up what each one was for and how it should be taken. That's when the confusion started. One site said to take vitamin D with fat. Another warned not to take calcium and magnesium at the same time. Some said take with food. Others said take separately from iron. I felt like I'd opened a door and walked into a maze. Still, I kept going. I learned that some supplements can block each other, that if you take them together, your body might not absorb them properly. I also learned that coffee, my trusted morning companion, could interfere with how certain vitamins are absorbed. I'd been swallowing my entire daily routine right after my first sip. No wonder it wasn't working. I decided to make a few changes. Nothing drastic, just small adjustments. I moved magnesium to the evening. Apparently, it could help with sleep too. I took my vitamin D with lunch, alongside something with fat, like eggs or avocado. I stopped taking my multivitamin with coffee. I even skipped it every other day, because some articles said we can absorb nutrients better that way. It felt clumsy at first. I forgot pills. Took them too late, missed doses. But I wrote things down, made a simple schedule, and gave myself permission not to be perfect. Slowly, it got easier. A few weeks later, I noticed something. My legs didn't ache as much when I got out of bed. My afternoon slump wasn't as heavy. I wasn't suddenly full of energy or dancing around the house, but I wasn't as foggy. It was subtle, gentle, but it felt real. What struck me most wasn't just that I felt better, it was that I felt like I understood my body better. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just following instructions blindly. I was listening, paying attention, giving each pill a bit of space to do its job. I didn't need to take more. I needed to take them smarter. And the truth is, no one ever told me this. Not my doctor, not the pharmacist. The bottles certainly didn't say it. It took a stranger at a community center, a quiet question, and a little bit of curiosity to open my eyes. I wasn't failing. I just hadn't been shown how to succeed yet. Later that week, I shared what I'd learned with a friend from church. She had the same habit, taking everything with her coffee before sunrise. When I told her what I'd changed, she looked surprised, then quietly said, "No one's ever mentioned that to me either." That's when I knew it wasn't just about me. It was something many of us were doing without realizing. Not out of laziness, but because no one ever sat down to explain. We had been swallowing good intentions the wrong way. After that conversation at church, something shifted. I realized that maybe part of the reason we struggle with health in our later years isn't just because our bodies slow down, but because no one tells us the small details that matter. We're given pills, but not explanations. We're handed instructions, but not understanding. We're told to take care of ourselves, but not how. And so we guess. I kept adjusting my supplement routine little by little. I set alarms on my phone, not loud ones, just soft chimes, to remind me when it was time for certain vitamins. I created 2 little trays, one for morning, one for evening. The evening tray was simple: magnesium, calcium, and anything that helped with sleep or needed to be taken away from food. The morning tray, now coffee-free, included the ones that worked best with breakfast. It felt strange at first breaking up something I used to do all at once, but it started to feel calmer, less rushed. It was like giving each supplement a proper moment to do its work, instead of rushing them all through a narrow door at the same time. I noticed that I began to trust my body more. When I felt a little more energetic in the afternoon, I didn't dismiss it as luck. When my knees weren't as stiff, I allowed myself to believe something was finally helping. These weren't miracles. They were slow, steady changes. But that's how aging works too, isn't it? Slowly, quietly, subtly. One day at the senior center, I brought up the topic again. A few people had heard the same talk I did weeks earlier, and they nodded along, but others hadn't, and were still doing what I used to do. One woman said, "Well, I take all mine with my oatmeal. Isn't that good enough?" I smiled gently and said, "It's a good start, but the oatmeal might be getting more benefit than you are." That made her laugh, and we started comparing notes. Before long, we were sharing tips, what worked for us, what we learned, what surprised us. It wasn't about judgment, it was about finally having the conversation we should have had years ago. That's the thing. We don't talk enough about these small health habits. Not because we don't care, but because we don't know what questions to ask. And the people who do know, well, sometimes they forget to slow down and explain. So we smile politely, nod at instructions, and go home to do things the way we always have. But we don't have to. We're never too old to learn something new, especially when it helps us feel even a little bit better in our own skin. It's funny, isn't it? We spend decades raising children, building careers, making decisions for others. Then somewhere along the way, we stop asking questions for ourselves. We settle into routines, even the ones that aren't working. But learning, real learning, doesn't stop when you turn 60 or 70 or even 90. It just changes shape. Sometimes it looks like listening a little more closely. Sometimes it looks like reading the fine print, and sometimes it looks like separating your supplements into 2 little trays, and finally giving your body the chance to thank you. As the weeks turned into months, my new supplement routine settled into the rhythm of daily life. I didn't think about it as much anymore. It became just another quiet act of care, like warming up the kettle in the morning or pulling the blanket over my knees when I watched the evening news. But what changed most wasn't just my body. It was the way I thought about health. For a long time, I saw health as something that either happened or didn't. You were lucky or unlucky. If something went wrong, you went to the doctor, got a pill, and hoped it helped. That was it. But this experience with supplements made me realize that the little choices we make, the ones no one claps for or even notices, those are the ones that can slowly tip the scales. No one told me separating my vitamins could help. No one stood beside me and said, "Don't take that one with coffee." But once I made those changes, I felt different. Not younger, not invincible, just clearer, more steady, like I'd stopped trying to push through a fog and started letting the sun burn it off slowly. I also started looking at other routines in my life with new eyes. I stopped brushing aside the stiffness in my hands as just age. I began stretching in the mornings, not to become flexible, but just to give my body a little more room to breathe. I added a short walk after dinner, not for exercise, but to let the day settle in my chest before sleep. These weren't things I read in a book or heard on a podcast. They were instincts I started listening to after years of ignoring them. Funny how one small change, just breaking up a pile of pills, could ripple outward like that. I talked to my daughter about it too. She's in her 40s and has her own cabinet of supplements. When I told her what I'd learned, she paused and said, "I never even thought about the timing." I smiled and said, "Neither did I, for most of my life." That's when I realized this wasn't just a senior problem. It was a people problem. We live in a world that sells us fixes but not instructions. We're handed solutions in little bottles but rarely told how to use them well. So we do our best. We copy what we've seen. We chase results and forget to read the small words, but those small words matter. I wish someone had told me these things earlier, sure, but maybe I wouldn't have listened back then. Maybe I needed to feel frustrated, to ask questions, to pay attention. Maybe the timing of the lesson matters just as much as the lesson itself. And maybe that's true for the pills, too. Now, every time I open my little trays, morning and evening, I don't just see pills. I see reminders of patience, of paying attention, of the fact that my health is not just my doctor's job. It's something I shape every day, one quiet habit at a time. And that, in some strange and ordinary way, has made me feel more alive. There's a kind of quiet wisdom that only comes after you've made the same mistake long enough to finally ask why. That's what this journey with supplements became for me. A lesson not in medicine, but in attention. In listening. In slowing down just enough to wonder if the way I'd always done things was really helping, or just familiar. I think a lot about the word support. That's what every bottle promises. Immune support, bone support, heart support. But support, real support, isn't just about showing up. It's about being in the right place at the right time, doing what needs to be done. And that goes both ways. I can't expect these little pills to support me if I don't support them too. By giving them the right conditions to work, by not rushing them down with coffee, by not stacking them together like a sandwich and hoping my body figures it out. We talk a lot about independence as we age. We fight for it. We celebrate it. But what no one tells you is that independence doesn't mean doing everything on your own. Sometimes it means learning how to make better choices with the tools you already have. It means unlearning habits that feel safe but aren't serving you anymore. It means being humble enough to start over at 70 or 80 or even 90. Not because you failed, but because now you finally understand what you need. I've started sharing more of this story, not in big speeches, but in small moments. At the grocery store, when someone reaches for the same brand of calcium I used to take. Or during lunch at the senior center, when someone mentions how tired they still feel, even with all their healthy stuff. I don't push. I don't preach. I just say, "Can I tell you something I learned the hard way?" Sometimes they listen. Sometimes they nod politely. Either way, I speak. Because maybe the lesson didn't come to me until later, but maybe it can come to someone else a little sooner. That's the thing about aging. It doesn't stop us from growing. If anything, it invites us to grow differently. Not upward like we used to, but inward. Deeper, wiser, softer even. And so now, when I take my supplements each day, split between morning and evening, no coffee, no rush, I feel something I didn't feel before. Not just hope, not just habit, but harmony, like I'm finally working with my body, not against it. Like I'm no longer just swallowing pills, but understanding them. And maybe that's the real fix we've been missing all along. We spend so much time looking for the next solution, the next breakthrough, the next thing that might make us feel young again. But maybe the answer isn't in something new. It's in doing what we already do, just with more care. More presence, more thought, because sometimes the most powerful change comes not from adding something, but from finally doing less, but doing it right.